Can I taste your juice?
Hey folks, PBusardo. So last weekend I went to the Rochester Vape meet, and I wasn't even entirely sure there were official Rochester Vape meets. Turns out there are, and I could have possibly been invited to them before and potentially did not go, ZEN. But this one I did go to. So, you know, a bunch of people in a room vaping. Vape meet, right? A bunch of juices to try, a lot of different devices hanging around. Andre from Smooth came because he lives right in Buffalo. Brad from Juicy Vapor came because he's right in Buffalo. I went because I'm in Rochester. Makes things easy. But in looking at the devices on the tables, there were an awful lot of Zenesis. Probably because the guy who makes the Zenesis lives in Rochester, and I didn't really know this either until very recently. So I did actually have a chance to sit down and talk with Zen, and I was actually kind of excited to bring you this interview. First of all, I apologize for the audio. This is even with the shotgun microphone. I'm going to have to get some lapel mics for these interviews. So I apologize for that. And it's rather long. He has a lot to say. He's kind of a, he's a thinker. He's a kind of a guru, kind of a hard to explain kind of guy. Very passionate about what he does and his ideas and his opinions. He's the kind of guy where if you say, you know, a battery is 1,000 mAh, he'll correct you and say, no, it's milliamp hours. There's no such thing as mAh. Okay, so I will try to use milliamp hours in his honor moving forward in the reviews, but I'm sure I'll slip up. So here's the interview that I had with Zen, the creator of the Zenesis, one of the most sought-after PVs out there. It's definitely on another level. It's price-wise, quality-wise, function-wise. Just it's up there with like the GGs and the Odysseus and, you know, things like that. Okay, so here's the interview with Zen, and I hope you enjoy it. Here we are with Zen, the Zen master. Yeah, the funny thing is, I had no idea you were here in Rochester. You know, sometimes you just don't put two and two together. I've heard about the Zenesis. I've heard great things about the Zenesis. I didn't know it was you. I didn't know you were in Rochester. It's like, well, how cool is that? That, you know, the guy who's making one of the most sought-after devices out there now is in my hometown. And actually, not even very far from my house.
Yeah.
I mean, we're going to have to do lunch or something.
Yeah, we're less than a couple miles apart where we live, from what I can gather,
Yeah, I'm right by Russell Station, here by the library.
Yeah.
So tell me about the Rochester group first.
Sure.
Is this, who started this group? Is that you? Or?
No, I don't know who started this group. The way I came to know this group was shortly after I started vaping. I was looking for any vape supply shop in town, doing Google searches and such, and I searched for e-cig Rochester, and one Saturday morning, and I found a ECF thread about the upstate New York vapors, or whatever they were calling themselves at the time, were having their first ever vape meet that day. So I said, you know, this is good. I don't know any other vapors. I had been vaping, you know, a few months, and figured, well, this would be a good opportunity to go meet some other people that are into this, because I knew one other person. I actually knew one other person that vaped, and we both started at the same time we worked together. So I crashed their little party. I wasn't a member of ECF. I saw what time it was going to be and where it was, and I went there, and it was already a fairly well organized group of people that had been interacting online, and met them. It was an interesting thing for me because I had never seen an Ego before. I had never seen anything except an 801. which I had already bought and modified, and was kind of moved on from its original platform. And so there was 8 or 9 people there, vaping egos, one with a screwdriver, again something I'd never seen, and myself with this Ghostbusters rig, which had batteries in a backpack and was coming around, and when you push the button, it sounded like Darth Vader breathing. So that was my first introduction to this group. They were already established, but had never met before. And the very next time that we got together was a Christmas party for vapors, which I held right here at this location.
So you mentioned before that you showed up at your first vape meet with something a little bit off the wall. So it sounds to me
it's completely off the wall.
So it sounds to me like you've been a modder pretty much from the start.
Oh yeah. But I mean, I've been a modder in everything that I do. I mod. I mean, it's. I mean, if I own a recording studio, I modify my microphones. I modify my gear to perform better. I don't leave anything alone. I buy a car, you won't recognize what's going on. I buy a motorcycle, you won't recognize. I modify everything. I'm always chasing that next horsepower, and sometimes that next mile per gallon, or sometimes it's that extra frequency response, whatever it is. I look at every device that's on the market that's sort of commercial as being a starting point. To bring a device to market, there needs to be compromise, so that you hit certain price points. And I look for what they left out to try to get that extra mile out of it, that extra performance. So
I think that's a terrific segue into a device that you're probably familiar with, the Zenesis.
Yeah, I've heard of that. I am familiar with the Zenesis.
So getting the extra mile out of your car, or maybe getting the extra vapor out of your e-liquid, you can probably equate the two. Talk to me about how the Zenesis came about.
The way the Zenesis came about was I had seen a device which was called the Hybrid Mini, and what that was a hybrid PB. It was the first one I had ever seen, and a hybrid simply means that it's a battery, it's a tank, it's an atomizer, all built into one hybrid unit. I loved that idea. I looked at that and said, these things don't need to be separate devices if they're all well executed. And I looked at that as being a revelation in a lot of ways. First things first, when you combine them together and you don't have interconnections to be able to couple them, you can remove the amount of dimension that those connections take. So, if a 510 connector takes 1/4 of an inch or 3/8 of an inch, which it does, you can knock that right off. So that's 3/8 of an inch gone. If you've got a couple in between, one part of the device and the other, and that takes 1/4 inch, you can knock that off. So from a form factor point of view, I love that idea. From a reliability point of view, every time you remove a connection of that kind, you remove a potential point of failure. And once you remove those points of failure, now you're looking at a situation where you have a device that inherently becomes more reliable, inherently becomes safer, and inherently will perform better in theory, provided all other things are equal, and well executed. So I was really attracted to that form factor. So I sought out to buy a Hybrid Mini. Like so many other of these devices that have Maven appeal, the high-end devices, it was manufactured in limited quantities in a weird Eastern European country that by a guy that had a really cool idea, and out it comes to the market, and they make 15 or 20 of them, and they sell them in these co-ops for $80 or $90 or $100. And then when people decide to sell them, they become $500 and $600 because they're so rare, and people are willing to pay it. So I saw these things when people would sell them, they were either broken and expensive or working and very expensive. So I saw hybrid minis selling for $550, $650, $700. It's a lot of money for something that started out life as $120 to $140. And in reality, at $120 to $140, it's a pretty good deal. When you start talking about these premium prices, it's insane, and I won't pay it. So I have a machine shop in my basement because I'm a microphone nut. I learned how to modify microphones. I make microphones, and I have a machine shop to support that hobby. So I said, well, if I can make a microphone, I can certainly make a PV. Turned out to be a bit more difficult than I expected, but it was still not insurmountable. So that $500 or $600 used PV that I didn't want to buy was replaced by a prototype that cost me, by the time it was all said and done, including buying tooling to do it, something that cost me about $2,500. But a hell of a PV. Yeah, and I kept from the minute that I saw up close and personal one of these mini hybrids, I said, there's things here that I would do different. And again, that high performance hot rodding mentality came in. What can I do to make it better? What's being addressed in this design? What's not being addressed in this design? So I started exploring really where can I go with this and what can be done to improve it. And I mean, a PV at the end of the day, a hybrid PV is a battery housing, a switch, a juice tank, and an atomizer. How much can you really improve on that? And that's when I started really realizing that what you can really improve upon is this atomizer design was designed from a function point of view to heat up this wire and get it going, but whoever designed it in the first place didn't have a firm grasp on how air moves, how air expands, how air does what it does, and how that affects the system. So I started really paying a lot of attention to the flow control, to the flow dynamics, to how is the vapor moving, how is it being produced. There's more going on than just heat up a coil and sizzle some juice. From here, we can actually cause that juice to expand,
along with the butterbeer in the big size,
and push it to the next level. So that's where the experimenting started, and took a while. Had several iterations before I finally said, "Eureka! This is it." I had that eureka moment and said, now I need to explain why it's doing what it's doing, because that's the key. Is you make that observation and then you explain why it's doing what it's doing. If you can't, then you can't improve on it. If it's doing something wrong, you can't fix it. If it's doing something right, you can't explain why, and therefore you can't improve on it. So that's when I really turned myself loose and started exploring really what is going on. Why is it working so well? And by doing that, I was able to discover why it works so well and expanded on it. Found the factors that made it good, discovered what those actually were, and then tweaked those until it performed even better. So that's how the Zenesis PV came to be. It was just me saying, I want one of these. There was no intention to sell it. There was no intention to get into manufacturing of it. It was, I want one, and anything worth having is worth building, you know. So I decided to give it a try. I didn't want to settle for something that was out there that didn't work all that well and cost a lot of money. I wanted something that worked better and cost a lot of money. So that turned into a number of my friends who are vapors said, "Wow, this thing is crazy good. You know, and you should make some more." All right, you know, I don't mind going to the basement and making chips, you know, and turning out a few PVs, but here's the problem. you know, mass production isn't my thing. You know, I like prototyping, but I decided I would dig in and mass produce. You know, maybe I'll make 10 a month. So I made 5. Drove down to Richmond for VaporCon, and down at Richmond, the whole trip down, I'm like a nervous teenager going to the prom. You know, am I going to get lucky? Yeah, well, am I going to get lucky? You know, are people, you know, people going to like it? And the very first person that tried it, you know, who was a vaping maven in his vaping community, made this broad pronouncement, you know, from on high, you know, that I approve of this device. He basically said, I've owned all of these type of things. This one's the best. So I was like, yeah, you're just saying that, you know, was my first thought. And then somebody else bought one. And they were kind of the vaping maven in their community, because these are the guys, these are the pioneers. They go buy the new stuff. They'll take the risk. They want, you know, they want to do it. And the first guy was, you know, big in the Windy City Vapors. The other one's big in the Boston area. And then the next one was big in the New York City area. And they all were saying the same thing. This thing is just freaking amazing. We love it. Why don't you make some more? Well, I sold out the 5 that I made, came back with the orders for a few more, which I said I wasn't going to do. And then proceeded to, through a series of interesting events, became a supplier on ECF, sort of against my will. I wasn't really going to sell too many, but I went for it. And then posted on my for sale thread on the suppliers forum that I'm going to be making them. Said that my intention was to sell about 10 a month. And within about an hour or two, I had, you know, 50 or 60 PMs, and by morning I had 150. So I had 150 people say, I want one. And I said, well, I can't make 150 of these. Now, interesting thing, when I started, the first ones were made of aluminum. And I wanted to make them lightweight aluminum, and immediately people started attacking aluminum is not safe, and aluminum is this and that. And anybody that would say that doesn't have an understanding of how aluminum works, but okay, there was this general thought that aluminum is not safe. So rather than fight that, I'll make it out of the material you want it made out of. You know, I'm not going to argue with you. I believe aluminum is perfectly safe. In fact, I know aluminum is perfectly safe. But you want stainless? I'll make it out of stainless. Now, I know a lot about working in aluminum. I don't know a lot about working in stainless. So I have to bone up on this. That's when I discovered that there's all kinds of different stainless. Some of it's perfectly safe for you. Some of it is actually implant grade. You can implant it in your body, it won't hurt you for the rest of your life. Some of it will kill you. Some of it has lead in it. And there's people that are vaping out of devices that may have lead in them, because they're not saying what kind of stainless they used. So cheap, easy machining stainless, which is the most logical thing to machine with, it has lead in it to make it easier to machine. So now you were worried about aluminum, which might hurt you. Well, there's no question as to whether lead will hurt you. Lead will kill you. And lead will build up. It's a heavy metal. It builds up in your body. Doesn't come out. It's not water soluble. It will over time kill you. I would not want to have my juice floating in a tank that's made of stainless steel with lead in it. Aluminum wouldn't scare me at all. So which one to choose? So I decided, what's the FDA have to say about this stuff? What is FDA approved for? You know, for different applications. So I looked. Well, you know, they got wash grade stuff. They got pharmaceutical grade. They've got restaurant grade, and that's when I discovered 316 LVM. Surgical steel, implant grade. Okay. Light goes off. That's what I want to make it out of. That material is approved by the FDA to be implanted in your body for the rest of your life. It won't hurt you. There's no question it won't hurt you. It can't hurt you. It's inert to you. So I said, bright idea. I'm going to make it out of that.
Depending on how
why not? Well, a real good reason why not. This stuff is really expensive. Like in quadruple the price of 316 that's not LVM. So I found a shop that specialized in hip replacements. They make parts for surgical implants, and I convinced that shop to make to make the parts for my PVs using their bar ends, stuff that they were going to turn into scrap. I bought their scrap and said, now turn this into my stuff, which meant that I was able to get the 316 LVM as scrap. So now I've got the first and the only PV that's ever been made out of 316 LVM, surgical implant grade steel. And if somebody else wanted to do it, I don't think they could possibly touch the price unless they find another shop that's willing to sell off their scrap.
So a lot of times people don't understand the reason behind the price of certain devices, and I think you've explained it pretty well right there.
Well, that's a big thing, is the cost factors in some of these things is crazy. I make one of these that's out of titanium now. We're probably getting ahead of the gun, but you know, this stuff is this titanium material is nearly $100 a foot.
Wow.
So when you start figuring out how many inches become scrap, how many inches need to hold this before it gets cut off, and that kind of stuff, you know, you're talking about before you even start spinning this metal, there's over $100 worth of metal in this PV.
And that's without any work at all.
That's with no work at all.
Yep.
It shows up on a truck as a chunk of metal. You know, so there's over $100 just in that. So when people say, why is that PV $500? Well, you know, it's worth nearly $120 before you even start spinning the metal. So it's very expensive to make something out of some of these exotic metals.
Okay, so we've talked about the look and the materials that go into making one of these PVs. How do they perform the way they do?
How do they perform the way they do, or why do they perform?
Both. What makes them a better device? What's the research that you put into that created a better PV?
I started with the concept of you've got a mesh which is designed to wick the juice up to a coil, and a coil which is made of kanthal. And the reason I use kanthal is because kanthal will get much hotter. It can sustain much more heat before it actually breaks down. So that makes it much more forgiving when you're setting it up. It just doesn't pop. It can withstand more of a heat attack. So starting with that, the tank is pretty easy to work out. I figured out how to size it, to get the volume for the size of juice that I wanted to fit in there. That's pretty straightforward stuff to do. What goes on in this topology here affects the way it performs. When you look at a lot of the Zenesis style atomizers, the Zenesis style atomizer historically has a wick that comes up the center, a pair of posts, and a coil that wraps around this mesh. You'll notice on this one, this is off to the side, and there's a reason why it's off to the side, and that is because when you take your air intake hole and set it there, you can now adjust the relative nature, the relative positioning of this intake hole to the wick. You can make it farther from it, you can make it closer to it, and you can rotate it over in this direction versus this direction, and they are two different sets of behaviors. Even though the distances may be the same, there's other things going on inside here with obstructions that cause the air to flow in a certain way. And I'm sorry,
That's okay, I'm right on it.
Okay, if you take a look at this top screw is sort of mushroom-like, and it overlaps that bottom post. It looks like I just didn't buy a screw that's the right size, but in reality, that's an essential function that's taking place. So this this here is intentionally wider than that post down there, because this, once everything is assembled, closely engages with the hole in the top of that. Let's bring it around, and if you can you get a shot down inside there?
A little bit.
Okay. Well, what you'll notice is that there is not a direct chimney where the vapor can come straight up through that hole. It has to get around that cap,
Right.
and come into the upper chamber via that method. Now, the size of the gap between that screw and the top of this cap affects how much pressure builds up in the atomization chamber, which affects the density of the vapor. Okay, so even though you take that cap off, all of that's invisible.
Right.
You can't see any of that. If you looked at an actual like three-dimensional drawing of how it all interacts together, like you could X-ray it, you would see that the vapor will come off of this. The air forces it to swirl around there. This screw head here is a specific size to cause it to create a Venturi effect, which then causes it to swirl up around and through this gap that's at the top.
Wow.
And all of those things, if you just take it and fire it up with the cap off, you see vapor rising, but you will never see what really happens when you're actually drawing on it. Because what really happens when you're drawing on it is the characteristics of change. And this air hole, when you're drawing on the top cap, causes air to blow against the coil, which stokes it like a forge. And as you turn it away or turn it closer to that, it affects the degree to which that's being stoked. So all of those things come into play, and without drawing air on it, you'll see it just kind of, calmly rises. Okay, but let's see if we can force this a little bit.
Yep.
So when you force air onto it, which is what happens it's the inverse of drawing, it causes it to produce even more vapor. So there's a lot going on in there.
So bottom line is, you've really given this absolutely no thought at all.
None. Stuck in my thumb, pulled out a plum.
That's really impressive.
You pop one of these atomizers in your mouth, and the first thing that you do is you suck on it way too hard, right? And it doesn't need to be sucked on that hard. You will eventually learn to suck on it a lot lighter. And when that happens, vapor production nearly doubles. It expands beautifully in the chamber and then in your mouth, and the flavor changes. It wakes right up, and it, even if you grab this thing and kill it, the flavor is more pronounced on this style of atomizer than on any other. But if you gently draw on it and learn how it wants to be vaped, then what opens up is unbelievably better. Not just a little better, a whole lot better. And a better vaping experience. Better nicotine delivery happens when that happens too. I mean, on and on. I find people that switch to these atomizers and these PVs, I find that they end up, some that are vaping 24 milligram cut to 6.
Wow.
Okay, some cut to 12. Everybody cuts. Nobody stays at the high level.
Wow.
They all come down. And they come down because the nicotine delivery is so much more efficient with this. It more completely atomizes the juice if you gently draw. If you suck on it hard, just like I said, charging that forge, it causes it to heat up more, and it causes it to scorch more, and it causes all sorts of things. Nice gentle hits on it, and you go after a week back to your favorite atomizer, you won't like it anymore.
So now, you make the full integrated PV with the atomizer as part of the PV.
That's right.
And you also make just the atomizer heads that you can purchase as well, right?
In fact, what I've been vaping here is my, this is called the Z80 G.
Okay, that looks like it's on the GG.
Yeah, what it is this is here's my GGTS. I'll just take this apart. My GGTS, because there's a 18500 battery in there, 18490 battery in here. I don't need the top section, but I could put the top section in there in an 18650. But that's my GGTS, and that is my Z80 G. And the Z80 G replaces the whole top section of the GG and threads right onto the body. So it turns your GG into a hybrid PV. Instead of it being threading into the 510 connection and having all of that extra gap and space and all that kind of stuff, we turn your GG right into a hybrid PV. So all of those design things that went into the hybrid concept come into play here. There's no 510 connector in there. It becomes a part of the PV and it minimizes the form. This is the Z80 G in brass on a stealth, on a GG stealth. So you'll notice that on the stealth, it's only about, what, 10-12 millimeters shorter than this with a 14 or with an 18490 battery. So surprise, surprise, a 350 versus a 490 battery. The only difference here is that extra battery life. There's nothing else being soaked up by, by mechanicalness that doesn't need to be there. I just invented that word. It was cool.
Now you have another one. It's not one of those that fits the Pro variant.
I do. This is the Z80 Pro, and the Z80 Pro addresses a couple of things that are really important to me and my sensibilities. One is, when you have on a Pro Vari, anytime you put a tank on top of it, these little walls, these little angles here we go. Those, you got that. See the gap in there. I find that stuff to be a little ugly. And if this was a bigger tank, it's overlapping and this angle there, and it starts looking awkward. And it starts looking like it's a really sort of a homebrew device. Not that this, not that this John Boy tank is in any way a homebrew device, but if this were a wider tank, a big mama tank or a big dad, whatever those are called, it's hanging out over the edge and it starts looking homebrew, and it's not particularly classy. So I created the Pro to if you take a look, there is a 510 connection there. The Z80 Pro comes down and threads on, and it ends up being just one straight continuous look.
I love it. That's the one I'm saving my pennies for, folks.
This is, to me, the minimum you should accept in terms of looks. I don't like it when there's weird gaps and it looks like this homebrew engineering. This wasn't that easy to make and cop that exact angle and make that all go. There's a few added bonuses that came to be in this, and that is this also will thread onto a Buzz Pro and cover and cover that long. In fact, let me grab. Can I just jump out and grab my Buzz here? Okay. So here's my Buzz. This is actually an aluminum Buzz, but the top cap is close enough to the Buzz Pro also. This little gizzy that sticks up there is cool, I guess, but I don't like looking at it, and this will thread right down onto that and completely obviates that gap. So now we've got something here that looks a lot more finished, and vapors in the world with bigger PVs and big battery mods and variable voltage spend a lot of time explaining what they have, and those gaps just, not that anybody ever says, well, what's that gap all about? It just makes it look more unsightly. So the idea here is to try to make it look better. So it'll fit the Buzz Pro. it'll fit the Pro Vary, as well as if you have a slant top Precise Plus, it does not work with the straight top, but with the slant top Precise Plus, it'll thread right down over that. And it's, even though there's a little of a, I'm sorry, you're having to chase it. Even though you've got a little bit of a gap, you know, a little bit of a step out there, you know, it really helps to bridge those gaps and looks, so that it looks like a more finished device. And you know, form follows function, sure, but from the point of view of you want it to look as good as you can make it look.
Of course you do.
You know, so that's what that's all about. Now, I also have this device, the same Z-Atty, but instead of this skirt on here, it's also available with just a flat bottom.
Okay.
And that's called the Z80 U, which is Universal 510.
Okay.
So you got your 510 connection. It'll thread onto any of your 510 devices, complete with gaps and you know, and that sort of thing. But if you've got a lot of different 510 devices, this gives you the opportunity to move it freely from devices that this won't fit.
Okay.
So if your primary device is a Pro Vary, don't buy a Z80 U, buy a Z80 Pro.
Right.
You know, if you've got a lot of devices that you want to hit, you might want to do both. But that's really what the Z-Atty is all about.
So how's business? Where do people buy these things if they want to buy them?
Oh, how is business? Business is actually real good. It's too good. I'm not complaining about that.
It's a good problem to have.
It's a great problem to have. I wish everybody in the e-cig business had this same problem. The website is houseofhybrids.com. There's a shopping cart there. Almost always, when you go to the site, you will see that the Zenesis PBs and Addies are sold. Okay. So there is product notifications on the site. If you want to get one of these, really, don't send me a PM begging. I'm flattered. It's great. But I get 400 PMs and 400 emails a day. And it doesn't help because I can't help you. You know, I want to, I just can't. And my machine shops are at capacity, but I just got the one shop to turn on a second shift. So they're going to have a second shift that's running only my products. So that should help get this thing cleared up. But put the product on notification 15 minutes before I load the product into the site to sell. I'll send out the notification that it's going live. I've learned that's the best way to do it before I've put it up and then said that it's live and it's sold out by the time they get it there. So I'm going to give a forewarning, 15-20 minutes, that it's going to be going live and then it'll go up. But frankly, the last time I went live with product, 100 pieces sold in, 100 anodized minis, 25 titaniums, and 25 stainless standards. So what is that, 150 pieces sold in 16 hours. So, yeah. Business is good.
That's terrific.
Business is good. I haven't made any money yet, but business is really good.
Okay.
So.
Well, I got to ask, because clearly you put a lot of thought into this. You're not your average Joe. What is your background?
Well, I work as a defense technology analyst for a company that contracts me out to the Office of Naval Research. I've got a solid background in engineering practices, best practices. That doesn't make me an engineer. That means that I'm able to identify best practices. Okay, but I have had many careers in this 55 years. I have been everything from a psychotherapist to I owned a store that specialized in home automation. I own a recording studio. I'm one of these Renaissance guys that's in a lot of things, but I've studied everything from psychology technology to IT, and I'm a lifetime learner. I've decided I'm never going to stop learning. I'm always trying to expand that knowledge base, which is why, at the age of 45, decided I wanted to learn how to be a machinist so that I could make microphones. It started from scratch. I'd never done any of that. So I'm just this guy that doesn't sleep and enjoys learning and trying new things. So what's my background? Everything from engineering, but not an engineer, to sales. I mean, it's been all over the map.
You are a very impressive guy.
As are you. I mean,
yeah, I don't hold a candle to what you're doing. It was great to actually sit down and talk to you, and I'm actually very proud and excited to bring you to my subscribers.
Well, that's cool. How many subscribers do you have now?
We're over 3,000.
Wow, that's great. That's great. I'll tell you what, the guys, the reviewer personalities, they're all over the map. There's all kinds of guys. I know that there's a review that's about to hit on the Zenesis coming up. I have a sense it's going to be a pretty positive review because the reviewer bought his initial piece and then contacted me and bought 3 more. So I think the review will be pretty good. Everybody's style is different, and they range from the goofy, let's talk about Ma and blah 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 to entertainingly bringing real information, and I really have always appreciated your way of doing it. I think I'd want to say that, and I hope that gets onto the thing, because everything from your camo smooth battery to your April Fool's joke that had me actually looking for nicotine test strips. All of that is great, and everybody who has seen me publicly calling you out to show up at a vape meet, you guys need to realize I'm just busting his stones. I don't hate the guy.
Well, it's been a really good experience, and I'm glad you watched the reviews. And that does mean a lot to me coming from a guy like you. Now, I do have to ask you one last question in closing.
Okay.
Just back out.
Uh-oh. Here we go.
Looking the way you do right now, if I were to sit on your lap and ask for Zenesis for Christmas, would I get one?
It's a funny thing. Looking the way that you look right now, the answer is no.
That's what I want to hear. No, but I definitely want to pick up the one. Now, the one for the Pro Bar is the
Z80 Pro.
Okay, that'll be the one that I will be saving my pennies.
Yeah, well, that's you probably got a little wait. When I made the discovery that the Z80 Pro would fit on the Buzz and the other devices, with the exception of the center pin being able to reach down and connect, I redesigned the center pin so it's self-adjusting. So that slowed that product down by about 2.5 weeks, but it should be out in the next week or so, next 2 weeks maybe. They should have been out really by today. That's my plan, like sometime this week. But I redesigned that real quick because I think that's really worthwhile to make that device fit a lot more things without changing the price or anything like that. It's way more complex to build, but much cooler. So I'm looking forward to that. About 10 to 12 people a day try to buy one right now. Every day. So there's 375 that I'll have in hand in the next couple of weeks, and then they're going to start coming at a rate of about 3 to 4 $400 a month. But the demand for it is huge.
Well, like, okay, so you live about a mile away from me. What if I were to come over the house and help you build one? Would that work in my favor at all?
No.
All right,
No,
Zen.
not really.
Thanks so much for talking to me, man. I really appreciate it. You've got some really amazing product, and I wish you the best of luck in the future.
Well, I'm glad you came out, and I'm really glad that you brought some people out to our little meet here too. And next time come without the cameras, and we'll have real fun.
All right, yeah.
All
See,
right.
that always happens whenever I roll the cameras. I'm missing out on all the fun. Thanks, Zen.
Take care.
Can I taste your juice?